students, welcome to today's study. I'm Michael Nyoro from the School of Computing and Informatics, the Department of Enterprise Computing, and I'll be taking you through computer security and cryptography, the unit BIT4104. The topic for today is Introduction to Security and Cryptography, and the overview of the study is Section 1 will be covering the concept of definition, terminology, history, as well as goals and services within cryptography. In Section 2, we are going to cover symmetric key cryptography as a type of cryptography, asymmetric key encryption, and hash functions. Section 1 simply deals with definition of terms so that we may understand some of the terminologies we are going to interact with in the course of the study. We're also going to have a brief overview of history. What is the genesis of computer cryptography? How has it evolved up to date? And probably what is the future of cryptography? And then we are going to discuss goals and services in an aim to understand what are some of the services that are offered by cryptography so as to ensure a computer system is secure. We start with definition of terms. Cryptography is the science of using mathematics to encrypt and decrypt data, according to Phil Zimmerman. And according to Bruce, cryptography is the art and science of keeping messages secure. So in simple terms, we can say the art and the science of concealing the messages to introduce secrecy in information security is recognized as cryptography. A plain text is simply a clear text, that is information that is in plain terms, which is readable to the human eye. And the process of disguising that message in such a way to hide its substance is what we call encryption. An encrypted message is referred to as a ciphertext. And the process of turning the ciphertext back into the plain text is what we call decryption. That one is well demonstrated in the diagram, whereby a plain text, which is simply a plain text, for example, good morning, the message is encrypted using a mathematical function so as to obtain a ciphertext, which we are also calling the coded hex text, which is also the ciphertext. And if the user wants to convert that message or the receiver back to the plain text that is readable, there is the use of a decryption algorithm so as to obtain back the plain text. And simply, this is what we call a crypto system. So in simple terms, we can define our crypto system and say it is an implementation of a cryptographic technique and their accompanying infrastructure to provide information security services. Another word for crypto system, we can also call it a cipher system because its aim is to produce a ciphertext. There are various components in a basic crypto system, which we will go through and define them. One of them is a plain text. A plain text is just simply a clear text. For example, an email that is readable to the human eye when it is being composed from the sender point. An encryption algorithm is a series of well-defined steps that convert a plain text into a ciphertext. So during transmission in a network, what is transmitted is a ciphertext, which is simply a plain text which has been encrypted. A ciphertext is a coded text, which in another term we can say it's a scrambled up information. The decryption algorithm is a series of well-defined steps that convert the ciphertext into a plain text. The moment the receiver at point B receives information from point A, they are able to use a decryption algorithm to convert the plain text back into the ciphertext back into plain text. An encryption key is an encryption mathematical function which is used alongside the encryption algorithm so as to obtain a ciphertext from a plain text. A decryption key is a decryption mathematical function that is used alongside the decryption algorithm so as to compute as a plain text out of a ciphertext. Cryptography is the science of securing data. At this point, we introduce another term, which is the opposite of cryptography. This is the science of analyzing and breaking secure communication. A classical cryptanalysis involves an interesting combination of analytical reasoning, application of mathematical tools, patterns, patience, determination, and sometimes luck. So we can simply say a cryptanalyst is an attacker or a hacker to a system. And cryptology is the study of both cryptography and cryptanalysis. We move on now to the history of cryptography and seek to understand what is the genesis and the origin of cryptography. For our understanding, civilization evolved and human beings got organized in terms of tribes, groups, and kingdoms. And this led to the emergence of power, battles, supremacy, and politics. And now this creates an idea of wanting to dominate, having ideas that fuel natural need for people to communicate secretly with selective recipient, which in turn ensure the continuous evolution of cryptography as well. The root of cryptography is found in the Roman Empire and also within the Egyptian civilization, as we are going to see. We start with Egypt, and the earliest form of cryptography is called the hieroglyph. The first known evidence of cryptography can be traced to use of hieroglyph. That is, we are talking of 4,000 years ago. And the Egyptians used to communicate message written in hieroglyphs. Most of such communication would be seen in the pyramids of the Egyptian, which every symbol had a meaning and also a communication. And maybe you may be able to identify some of the symbols which are currently under a lot of debate in the current generation. The Roman Empire also took part in cryptography, and the key man is Caesar, and out of him came what we call the Caesar shift cipher. And in definition, we can say the Caesar shift cipher relies on shifting the letters of a message by a grade number. 3 was a common practice, as was used by Caesar himself. And the recipient of the message then would shift the letters back to the same number and obtain the original message. The Caesar cipher is named after Julius Caesar, who used it to shift 3 to protect messages of military significance. Here is a demonstration of the same, whereby using a shift of 3, A moves to letter D, B moves to letter E, and C moves to letter F. And that one is what we call now an encryption, whereby a plain text, for example, Internet Society, Ghana chapter, we are going to decrypt or we are going to encrypt that information. And at the moment that information is encrypted, the ciphertext we are going to receive after doing the 3 shift, it means letter I moves on to letter L, N moves on to Q. And at the moment of decryption, the opposite of encryption is going to happen. Instead of shifting forward, the shift happens backward. For example, having obtained such a message from the receiver point, using a shift backward, F moves back to C, E moves back to B, and D moves to A. And that way, the message was able to be concealed, and any interception would not understand the type of the scrambled up information. Or by the time the message is decrypted, the attack has already happened. Moving on to goals and services, we are going to discuss some of the goals of cryptography. And the primary goal of cryptography is to secure important data on the hard disk, or as it passes through a medium that may not be secure itself. Usually that medium is a computer network. So the main goal is to make sure that information is secure, whether it is stored in a hard disk or it is in a transmission through internet or a computer network. There are 4 key security services, and namely confidentiality, which deals with the secrecy of information; integrity, which makes sure information is anti-tamper-proof or anti-tampering; authentication, which simply means the information reaches the intended recipient; non-repudiation, which simply means that a sender cannot deny having ever committed a transaction or having ever sent an email. We'll define each terms separately so that we may understand clearly the services of computer cryptography and security system. One of them is confidentiality, or in another word, secrecy or privacy of information. This ensures that no one can read the message except the intended recipient, and data is kept secret from those without the proper credentials, even if that data travels through an insecure medium. And that one is achieved through use of encryption, so that data during transmission appears as a ciphertext and cannot be prone to an attack within the transmission. Integrity, this is anti-tampering. This is assuring that the receiver receives message that has not been altered in any way from the original. What this means under integrity, it does not necessarily prevent the tampering of data, but it ensures it's able to report if data has been altered in any way. The other 2 goals and services is authentication. Authentication helps to establish identity for authentication purpose. The process of proving one's identity is what we are calling the authentication. And the primary forms of host-to-host authentication on the internet today are named on address-based, both of which are notoriously weak. Under authentication, we are just making sure only the intended receiver has the right password, has the right key, so that no one else, after receiving the message, can be able to decrypt the same. It deals so much with ensuring that the process of identity is proven. If it's sender A who is sending to B, that means B can be able to verify the information has originated from A. Non-repudiation, this is a mechanism to prove that the sender really sent the message. In the world and the era of web transaction, it's very easy for someone to deny having ever sent an email, having ever done an order, or having committed a transaction. And what we mean by non-repudiation is protecting the receiver in case the sender denies having committed a transaction or sent an email or made a form of communication. Types of cryptography, we're in section 2, and our aim in this section is to discuss symmetric key cryptography, understand asymmetric key cryptography, and also understand some of the hash functions which we have under cryptography. We start with symmetric key cryptography, and we can define that and also say it's also known as the secret key cryptography, or conventionally cryptography. Symmetric key cryptography is an encryption system in which the sender and the receiver of the message share a single key or a common key. So when we talk about symmetric key encryption, we are just simply saying the algorithm that is used to do the encryption and also the decryption uses the same secret key to do both encryption and decryption. We can define a key by saying this is a piece of information or a parameter, or in other words, a mathematical function that determines the functional output of a cryptographic algorithm or a cipher. This is the earliest form of cryptography, that is symmetric key cryptography. To understand this better, there is a diagram here that illustrates a plain text which is encrypted using a key here, and the moment the message is transmitted as a ciphertext and received by the receiver, the decryption process also uses the same key to obtain a plain text. So in simple terms, symmetric simply means equal. That is the same key used for encryption, and decryption is the same. It is good to note that the encryption and decryption algorithm are not the same, despite the key that is used in both processes being the same. We have various types of symmetric key cryptography, and we are going to go through them. One of them is what we call Data Encryption Standard, that is DES. This was invented and published back in 1977, and it was used by U.S. National Bureau of Standards. Basically, the DES uses a 56-bit key and maps a 64-bit input block of plain text on a 64-bit output block of ciphertext. 56-bit is rather small for today's computing power. What we mean by that is DS, being the earliest form of symmetric key cryptography, had only one weakness, and the weakness was the size of the encryption bits, that is 56-bit, was too small. And using the high-powered machines we have today, 64-bit system and upward, it means decrypting this would be very simple and an easy target for the hackers. So DES is no longer in use based on its weakness. And that one prompted the researchers to go on and invent the triple DES. The triple DES was the answer to the many shortcomings of the DES, as mentioned. Since it is based on the DES algorithm, it is very easy to modify existing software to use triple DES. It also has the advantage of having the proven reliability and a longer key length that eliminates many of the short attacks that can be used to reduce the amount of time it takes to break the DES. We are simply talking of a situation whereby we had a 54-bit that can be multiplied to the level of 3. And that one means the longer the encryption algorithm and the more the bits that were used in encryption, it makes it a bit more hard to do the decryption and obtain the plain text that was being transmitted. Another example is the Advanced Encryption Standard, that is AES. The Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, is an encryption standard adopted by the U.S. government. The standard comprises of 3 blocks of cipher, that is the 128, the 192, and the 256. What we need to understand here, 128 stands for the size of the bits that are used in the encryption, 192 the size of the bit, and also 256 being the largest. This is largely adopted from the inventor initially. Each advanced encryption standard has 128-bit block size, which with the key size of 128, 192, and 256 respectively. The AES ciphers have been analyzed extensively and are now used worldwide, as was the case with the predecessor, the data encryption standard. So simply put is that currently up to date, the AES is in use based on its strength of the bits, and it will require a lot of computer processing power to be able to break such a bit block size into a plain text. Another example of asymmetric key cryptography is the IDEA, which stands for the International Data Encryption Algorithm, which was developed in 1991. The same with AES. It uses a 128-bit key to encrypt a 64-bit block of plain text into 64-bit of ciphertext. The IDEA generally, its structure is very similar to the DES, that is the genesis of symmetric cryptography. It performs 17 rounds, each round taking 64 bits of input to produce 64 bits of output, using per round keys generated from the 128-bit. In simple terms, to understand this, what it entails is where the DES was doing only one form of encryption, IDEA is able to do 17 rounds or 17 permutation, meaning when we receive a 64-bit and we are using a 128-bit key, then 17 levels of permutation are done on the data, making it very hard to decrypt the same. Other types of symmetric key cryptography are as recorded: the blowfish, the crab, the fill, the cast, the cipher, and the LC5, which may be discussed later. We have different types of cryptography, and the problem with the conventional cryptography key management, or what we have as the major weakness of symmetric key system, as we have seen, is one, they are simpler and faster, and their main drawback is that the two parties must somehow exchange the key in a secure way and keep it secure after that. That one introduces what we call key management. Before any communication happens between sender A and receiver B, it means they must establish a key management exchange mechanism, which ends up producing a lot of overheads in terms of communication network, making it weak. And that led to the need of having what we call public key cryptography, so as to solve the weaknesses of symmetric key systems. That now brings us to the second type of asymmetric key encryption, which now is a bit more different from symmetric. Asymmetric key cryptography is simply known as the public key cryptography, which refers to the cryptographic algorithm which requires two separate keys. One is the private key, which is used for decryption, and the other one is the public key, which is used for the encryption process. The public key is simply within the public domain, and it's good to understand this. The public key is prepared by the recipient of the information, and it is shared within the public domain for encryption purpose. So if the sender A wants to send information to the receiver B, what happens is he or she is able to access the public key in the public domain and then encrypt the information into a ciphertext. Remember, the key is simply a mathematical function which is used for either the encryption or the decryption process. And the moment the receiver, the recipient of the message received is able to use the private key to do the decryption process and obtain back the plain text. It is good to understand this, that the public key and the private key are related, but they are not similar, given that they are computed by the recipient of the information. A further explanation to that is the process of the asymmetric key encryption, whereby step number one, the recipient of information prepares the public key and then shares it in the public key, where the sender can be able to receive the key. Step number two, the sender uses the public key to encrypt the plain text. And this is where we have the sender's message, uses the public key, which is from the recipient, and then the message is sent as an encrypted message. In step number three, the sender gives the ciphertext to you, or simply the recipient, that is initially the person who prepared the public key. And upon receiving that message, maybe over internet or any other network system, in step number 4, the recipient uses the private key to decrypt the ciphertext and is able now to achieve back the plain text which was sent by the sender A. Discussing further the concept of asymmetric key cryptography, we can say the public key cryptography is very advanced form of cryptography. As we earlier saw the symmetric key cryptography, it was officially invented by Whitefield Diffie and Martin Hellman in 1975. And the basic technique of public key cryptography was discovered in 1973. That is a bit more earlier than 1975, but it was kept as a secret until 1997. We are going to discuss various examples of asymmetric key cryptography so as to understand their operations and how different they are from the symmetric key cryptography. One of them is the digital signature standard, DSS. Digital signature standard, DSS, is the digital signature algorithm, DSA, developed by the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, to generate a digital signature for the authentication of electronic document. So initially, DSS was meant for the NSA agencies in terms of exchanging security documents. This was put forth by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, in 1994, and has become the United States government standard for authentication of electronic documents. So DSS is Federal Information Processing Standards, FIPS 186. Another example of asymmetric key cryptography is the RSA. RSA is just initials of the 3 inventors, that is Rivest, Shamil, and Aduman, who first publicly described it in 1977. This is an algorithm of the public key cryptography. It is the first algorithm known to be suitable for signing as well as encryption, and one of the first great advances in public key cryptography. It is widely used in electronic commerce protocols and is believed to be secure given sufficiently it has long keys and the use of up-to-date implementation. The use of keys, long keys, and what we mean by long keys is long bits, 128 bits and above. It means the more the bits, the longer the block of the encryption algorithm, and the harder it is to be able to do a decryption or a cryptanalysis to a system. We are going to give an example which was given as a challenge by Rivest, Shamil, and Aduman, and they placed a challenge in Martin Gardner's column in the Scientific American Journal, in which the writer was invited to crack. So this is a ciphertext, C, and it was put in the public domain for people to have a challenge and compute it. Surprisingly, this was solved in April 26, 1994, and it was cracked by an international effort via internet with the use of 1,600 workstation mainframes and supercomputers, which attacked the number for 8 consecutive months before finding its public key and private key. And simply, the encryption key which they were able to discover is 9007, and the message which was previously displayed, they were able to discover the message was the first solver wins $100. Of course, simply put, the RSA algorithm is safe, and it would be incredibly difficult to gather such international participants to commit malicious acts. And that one proves the strength of RSA in terms of one of the best standards to be used in e-commerce transactions up to date. The other example of asymmetric key cryptography is what we call EDGAR-MAL. EDGAR-MAL is a product key method that is used in both encryption and digital signing. The encryption algorithm is similar in nature to the Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol, and it is used in many applications and uses discrete logarithms. And EDGAR-MAL is used in free GNU privacy guard software. So in simple terms, the Diffie-Hellman agreement protocol is much more related to the EDGAR-MAL asymmetric key cryptography. Having discussed the two types of cryptographic algorithms, that is the symmetric and the asymmetric, it leads us to discuss the hash function as that type of cryptographic system. What is a hash function? A hash function is a cryptographic hash function that takes an arbitrary block of data and returns a fixed size bit string. The cryptographic hash value such that any accidental or intentional change of the data will be very high probability change the hash value. The data is to be encoded. The data to be encoded are often called the message, and the hash value is sometimes called the message digest or simply digest. Here is a simple illustration of how a hash function works. A message M of any arbitrary length is taken through a hash function represented by H, and an output of a hash value H is given out. So in simple terms, in discussing what is a hash function, it is the ideal cryptographic hash function which has 4 properties. One of them, it is easy to compute the hash value for any given message. This one moves us from the concept of asymmetric and asymmetric because any given length of a message is able to be computed in a hash value. It is infeasible to generate a message that has a given hash. That one means at no given time would you have 2 different messages with the same hash function. It is infeasible to modify a message without changing the hash. So in simple terms, at any given time, you cannot change or modify the message without altering the hash value which was used to compute the same. It is also infeasible to find 2 different messages with the same hash. This is what we call collision. At no single time would you find 2 colliding messages that have the same hash value. We have different types of hash functions as stated, and of interest and of much usage is the message digest, which are categorized in message digest version 2, 4, 5, and also 6. Below is a demonstration of a message digest. For example, we have an input, a message Fox, and then it goes through a cryptographic hash function, and the digest message is computed as thus. And this is the message that is now transmitted over the network, which is very hard to think of it being this. Another message, just to compare with the fox, we have the red fox jumps over the blue dog, and then we have a cryptographic hash function which computes the message and is able to generate a digest, which is now able to be transmitted over the net. Having these messages, the length being different and being of different input, and having a cryptographic hash function which is unique to each message, then a digest is able to tell the different size. For example, Fox being of a length of 3 characters has the same digest size with also a message as this, which is a sentence of several sentences, which makes it a secure way of transmitting and hashing information. Another example, using the MD5 hash value. For example, you can take the word Superman, and the output would be as demonstrated. And if you're able to hack and access the message, the only thing you would see demonstrated is a search. We also have a whole sentence there, a Mine's book from the Game of Thrones. And if this is computed using MD5 hash value, you obtain that arbitrary length hash value. There's also a full document, which is a shopping list, which when computed, it acquires the same length type of a hash value, which is very hard to differentiate, because mostly when hackers gain access to a system, they can be able to tell based on the length of the hash value which message is long, which message is of importance. But at this time, even taking a picture and computing a hash value of it before transmitting, then the hash value is very hard to tell what contains which data input, making it very secure. Despite all this, it was noted that there were some collisions in MD5, making it also weak. In March 2005, Wang and Hongbo of Shandong University in China created a pair of files that share the same MD5 checksum. Hence, they prove there is a collision using the MD5. And that led now to a more secure hash function, which is the SHA, S-H-A, secure hash algorithm, so as to ensure there is no collision within the message digest. The SHA hash function has a set of cryptographic hash functions designed by the National Security Agency, that is NSA, and published by NIST as the U.S. Federal Information Processing Standard. The standard has these three components, that is, SHA stands for Secure Hash Algorithm, and because of the successful attacks on the MD5, that led now to the introduction of SHA, that is version 0, and theoretical attacks on SHA, that is version 1, NIST perceived a need for an alternative dissimilar cryptographic hash function, which became the SHA-3, which is simply an advancement from SHA-0 version 1 and then in version 3. And in October 2012, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, chose the KISAC algorithm as the new SHA-3 standard. So simply put, those are the major algorithms that we have in the market, cryptographic systems. And of much understanding, in summary, is to understand what is a cryptographic system, and also be able to understand the different types of cryptographic system, their weaknesses, and their strength. Thank you so much for your time.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.